It was an ordinary Thursday morning when a remarkable encounter unfolded on a sunlit highway in Clovis, California. Judge Sarah Mitchell was driving her sleek 2022 silver Lexus, mentally preparing for the day ahead. Dressed in a professional navy blue pantsuit, with her hair neatly pinned back, just the way she always did for court, she was focused on her schedule. She had sentencing reports to finalize before noon, a meeting with the district attorney at 3, and perhaps, if time allowed, a chance to enjoy an early dinner with her husband. As she cruised along the right lane, the tranquility of her morning was abruptly disrupted. At the intersection of Sierra and Ashland, flashing red and blue lights flickered behind her, accompanied by the sharp sound of a siren. Confused, Sarah glanced at her mirrors. There was no speeding, no erratic driving, and certainly no phone in hand. Reluctantly, she turned on her signal and pulled over to the curb, her heart racing not from fear, but from experience. Reaching for her wallet, she retrieved her driver's license, vehicle registration, and judicial ID, carefully placing them on the dashboard for visibility. With her hands back on the steering wheel, fingers open and visible, she prepared for the encounter. The officer who approached was tall, with a fresh badge gleaming on his uniform. Officer Jake Thompson, a man in his mid-30s whose demeanor suggested he had something to prove. "License and registration," he demanded curtly, skipping any pleasantries or explanation. "They're right here on the dash, officer," Sarah replied, her voice calm and steady. "May I reach for them?" "Just get them," he snapped, his eyes scanning her face, then lingering on her attire, and finally returning to the steering wheel. "This is your car?" he questioned, a hint of skepticism in his tone. "Yes, it is," she responded, a slight furrow in her brow. After checking her license, he looked back at her, his expression shifting. "You say your name's Sarah Mitchell?" "I didn't say it, but yes, it's on the license," she replied, maintaining her composure. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle for me?" His tone was flat, devoid of context or explanation. Taken aback, Sarah hesitated. A few pedestrians on the sidewalk began to slow down, and one young man across the street had taken out his phone, recording the entire scenario. The sight of onlookers only intensified Officer Thompson's tension. "Sir," she addressed him firmly, "you're making a mistake. I'm Judge Sarah Mitchell from the Fresno County Superior Court. This vehicle is mine, registered to me and my husband." He glanced down at the ID she had presented, but his lips curled slightly, revealing his disbelief. "Anyone can forge a badge. I suggest you confirm it with dispatch before this escalates." As the situation unfolded, the atmosphere grew heavy. Sarah's left hand remained on the wheel, while her right rested calmly on her thigh. "Officer, I'm asking you again. Please confirm my identity with dispatch." But Officer Thompson stood his ground, the tension palpable in the air. A woman holding a coffee cup from a nearby cafe interjected, "She's a judge. I know her. That's Judge Mitchell from Channel 26. "Ma'am, please keep walking," he replied curtly, still fixated on Sarah. Taking a deep breath, she held her judicial ID out the window again, her fingers trembling not with fear, but with disbelief. "This badge was issued by the state of California. If you have reason to believe I've committed a crime, I'll cooperate fully. But you're escalating a situation that shouldn't have occurred in the first place." Thompson snatched the ID from her hand and studied it, yet still seemed unsatisfied. "You said the car is yours, right?" "Yes." "I ran the plate, and it's registered under a David Mitchell." Her incredulity almost made her laugh, but she contained it. Instead, she explained patiently, "That's my husband. We've been married for 26 years. If you looked further down the DMV file, you'd see both our names." His eyes narrowed, filled with doubt. "So you're telling me a man bought this car and put your name on it too?" "No," she clarified, her voice resolute. "I'm telling you we bought the car together, joint account, joint title, because that's how married people do things." As tensions mounted, More bystanders gathered, offering murmurs of support for Sarah. A man filming the interaction shouted, "You're embarrassing yourself, officer." But Thompson seemed unfazed, his focus unwavering. Without warning, he reached for the door handle, but Sarah swiftly locked it. "Do not open my door. I have not consented to a search or seizure." "Now you're obstructing," he snapped. "I'm asserting my rights," she countered firmly, her resolve unyielding. The scene intensified as Thompson called into his radio, requesting backup for a possible stolen vehicle match, while Sarah remained steadfast, her voice steady. "This isn't about the car. This is about how you see me." The crowd around them was growing, a mix of concern and disbelief, some nodding in agreement with Sarah's words. The atmosphere was charged with tension as they watched the confrontation unfold, each person silently processing the implications of the moment. As the sirens wailed in the distance, backup was on the way. But the situation had evolved into something much larger than a simple traffic stop. It was a clash of pride and power, revealing the painful reality of bias and the assumptions that often accompany it. As Sarah Mitchell sat behind the wheel of her Lexus, the tension in the air was palpable. Officer Jake Thompson, his stance rigid and authoritative, continued to scrutinize her, clearly unconvinced by her claims. The crowd of onlookers had grown, their murmurs and whispers creating a backdrop of mounting unease. Bystanders exchanged glances, some pulling out their phones to record the encounter, while others watched with a mixture of concern and disbelief at the unfolding scene. "Step out of the vehicle, please," Thompson repeated, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. The command felt more like a challenge than a request, and Sarah could sense the underlying hostility. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to be intimidated. "Officer, I'm not sure I understand why you're insisting I step out of my car," Sarah replied, her voice steady but firm. "Is there a specific issue here? I have all my documentation right in front of you." Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. She had never imagined she would find herself in such a predicament, especially given her position as a judge. Thompson remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he stared at her, as if trying to uncover some hidden truth. "You match the description of a suspect associated with a vehicle theft reported about 10 minutes ago," he finally stated, his tone flat and unyielding.
Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach, not from fear, but from a cold realization of the implications behind his words. "This is my car, officer," she insisted, maintaining eye contact. "I have the registration right here, and I'm happy to cooperate fully. You're welcome to call dispatch to verify both my identity and the ownership of this vehicle." As she spoke, she tried to project calmness, but she could feel the tension building within her.
The onlookers were watching intently, their expressions reflecting a mix of surprise and concern. Thompson, however, seemed unmoved by her explanations. His gaze shifted momentarily to the crowd, taking in the people who had gathered to witness the incident. A man in the front row shouted, "She's a judge! You can't treat her like this!" But the officer's demeanor remained unchanged. He was resolute, determined to assert his authority. "Step out of the vehicle," he repeated, his voice now laced with irritation. "I'm not going to ask you again." The command was more aggressive this time, and Sarah could feel her heart racing. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It had escalated into a confrontation where her rights were being challenged. "Officer, I am not moving until you clarify whether I am being detained or if I am free to go," she responded, her tone unwavering. She knew her rights, and she was determined to stand her ground. The crowd around them began to murmur, some expressing disbelief at the situation unfolding before them, while others continued to film, capturing every moment. Thompson's frustration was evident as he glanced at Sarah's judicial ID once more, his lips curling slightly in disbelief. "This doesn't mean anything to me," he said dismissively. "You could have faked this badge just like anyone else." His words stung, and Sarah's composure faltered for a moment. How could he dismiss her identity so easily? "I've been a judge for years, and I've earned my position through hard work and dedication," she replied, her voice rising slightly. "You're making a mistake, and I don't understand why you refuse to acknowledge that." The crowd began to shift, sensing the gravity of the situation. A bystander stepped forward, joining Sarah in her defense. "Come on, man, this is ridiculous," the bystander called out, his voice cutting through the tension. "You're making a fool of yourself. Just call it in." As more voices joined in, the officer's grip on the situation started to slip. He seemed increasingly aware of the eyes watching him, yet his pride prevented him from backing down. "Ma'am, please stay in your vehicle," Thompson barked at the bystander, but the man refused to back off. "You're in the wrong here. Just admit it." The crowd nodded in agreement, their murmurs escalating into a chorus of support for Sarah. "Please," she interjected, her voice breaking through the chaos. "I appreciate your support, but I need to handle this. Officer, I'm asking you once more to verify my identity with dispatch." She could feel the weight of the crowd's gaze, their collective hope resting on her shoulders. Thompson hesitated, clearly caught between his instinct to assert authority and the growing evidence of his mistake. The arrival of backup was imminent, and Sarah sensed the shift in momentum. The younger officer who stepped out of the patrol car, Officer Ryan Barnes, appeared more approachable. He looked at Sarah with a hint of recognition, and his demeanor was softer. "Officer Thompson, what's going on here?" Barnes asked, assessing the situation quickly. "She's refusing to step out of the vehicle," Thompson muttered, still defensive. "Claims she's a judge." Barnes stepped closer to the driver's window, his eyes scanning Sarah's ID, and then meeting her gaze. "Wait a minute. This is Judge Mitchell, right? I know who she is. She presided over that robbery case last month." Thompson shrugged, his expression still skeptical. "Could be fake. I doubt it." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Please, Officer Barnes, verify my credentials. I'm here to cooperate." As Barnes moved to call in the verification, the atmosphere began to shift. The crowd, once filled with tension, now buzzed with a sense of vindication. They were witnessing a moment of reckoning, a confrontation between authority and truth. Rhonda's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Thompson's escalating frustration. "This isn't just about the car," she reiterated, her voice steady. "This is about how you perceive me." The words hung in the air, resonating with the crowd as they realized the broader implications of the moment. Sarah was not just a judge. She was a symbol of resilience against bias and discrimination. As Officer Barnes validated her identity, the tension slowly began to dissipate. But the impact of the encounter would linger long after the officers left the scene. As the standoff continued, the atmosphere remained thick with tension. Sarah Mitchell sat firmly in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her heart pounding as Officer Jake Thompson stared her down. The crowd of bystanders had grown larger, their faces a mixture of concern and disbelief as they witnessed a judge being treated as a criminal. The air buzzed with murmurs, and several people were recording the incident on their smartphones, capturing every moment of the confrontation. "Step out of the vehicle now!" Thompson's voice rang out again, his tone a mixture of irritation and authority. Sarah remained resolute, unwilling to comply with the unfounded demand. She felt the eyes of the crowd on her, their silent support bolstering her courage. "Officer, I'm not stepping out until you clarify whether I'm being detained or if I'm free to go," she reiterated, her voice steady and calm. The more she stood her ground, the more the crowd seemed to rally behind her. A woman in the front row spoke up. "She's a judge. You can't treat her like this." Her words echoed through the group, igniting a sense of solidarity among the onlookers. Thompson's frustration was palpable. He glanced around, surveying the growing group of witnesses, before turning his attention back to Sarah. "You match the description of a suspect involved in a recent vehicle theft," he insisted, his tone dismissive. I need to ensure the situation is handled properly." "This is absurd," Sarah replied, her voice rising slightly. "I am not a suspect. I have done nothing wrong. I'm simply trying to go about my day." The crowd murmured in agreement, many shaking their heads in disbelief at Thompson's unfounded accusations. Suddenly, the sound of another patrol car approached, and Sarah felt a surge of hope. The arrival of backup could mean a change in the tide of the situation. Officer Ryan Barnes stepped out of the vehicle, his demeanor noticeably calmer and more approachable than Thompson's. He looked at Sarah, recognition dawning on his face. "Judge Mitchell, is that you?" he asked, stepping closer to the driver's side window. "Yes, officer," Sarah replied, relief flooding her voice. "Thank you for coming. This officer is refusing to acknowledge my identity and is treating me as a criminal without cause." Barnes turned to Thompson, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "What's going on here?" He asked, trying to grasp the situation. Thompson, still defensive, muttered, "She's refusing to step out of the vehicle. Claims she's a judge, but doesn't want to cooperate." Barnes raised an eyebrow, his tone firm yet diplomatic. "Let's verify her information before we escalate this any further. Judge Mitchell, can I see your ID again?" As Sarah handed over her judicial ID, she felt the tension shift slightly. The crowd watched intently, their phones still recording, capturing the moment when justice might finally prevail. Barnes examined the ID, his eyes widening as he recognized her credentials. "This is Judge Mitchell. I remember her from several cases," he said, glancing back at Thompson. "You need to call this in." Thompson hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding situation, but he reluctantly took out his radio. "I'm requesting a verification on Judge Sarah Mitchell. Her ID checks out." As he spoke into the radio, Sarah seized the moment to address the crowd. "Thank you all for your support. This is about more than just me. It's about how we treat each other and the assumptions that can lead to unjust situations." The crowd responded with nods and murmurs of agreement, their solidarity palpable. Barnes continued to engage with Sarah, his demeanor shifting to one of respect. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Judge. It shouldn't have come to this. I'll make sure this is sorted out." "Thank you, Officer Barnes," she replied, grateful for his understanding. "But this should never have happened in the first place. No one should be treated like this simply because of their appearance or the car they drive." Thompson, still on the radio, looked increasingly flustered as he heard the confirmation of Sarah's identity come through. The realization that he had acted unjustly was beginning to sink in, but pride and frustration held him back from admitting his mistake openly. As the backup units arrived, the crowd began to swell. More people joined, drawn by the commotion, many now aware of the injustice unfolding before them. The scene had shifted from a simple traffic stop to a public demonstration against profiling and discrimination. A few bystanders began to voice their opinions, echoing Sarah's sentiments. "This is unacceptable," one man shouted. "Judges should be respected, not harassed on the street." The energy in the crowd grew, and Sarah felt a sense of empowerment from the collective voices around her. "Are you still requiring her to exit the vehicle, Officer Thompson?" Barnes asked, pointedly, eyeing his colleague with a mixture of resolve and disappointment. Thompson's silence spoke volumes. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly grappling with the reality of his actions. "No," he finally replied, his tone begrudging. "I think we can let her go." "Good," Barnes responded, his voice firm. "Judge Mitchell, you are free to go. I'm sorry for the distress this has caused you." As Sarah unlocked her door and stepped out of the vehicle, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She stood tall, facing the crowd and the officers with dignity. "Thank you for standing by me," she said, her voice steady. "Let this be a lesson that we must challenge bias wherever we see it, and that our voices matter." The crowd erupted in applause, their support echoing in the warm air. Sarah glanced at Thompson, who stood rigid, clearly uncomfortable. She knew this moment was about more than just her. It was about being seen and heard, about challenging assumptions and demanding respect. As she walked away from the scene, she felt empowered, knowing that she had not only defended her rights, but had also sparked a larger conversation about justice and equality. As Sarah Mitchell stepped out of her Lexus, the weight of the moment settled around her. The crowd that had gathered watched intently, their expressions filled with a mixture of relief and admiration. The tension that had hung in the air began to dissipate, replaced by a palpable sense of vindication. She could feel their support as she faced Officer Jake Thompson, who stood rigidly by his patrol car, clearly grappling with the implications of his earlier actions. "Thank you," Sarah said softly to Officer Ryan Barnes, who had stepped in to defuse the situation. "I appreciate your help in clarifying this." "Of course, Judge," Barnes replied earnestly. "It should never have escalated to this point. I'm sorry for what you had to endure." His sincerity was evident, and Sarah felt a flicker of hope that change might be possible within the system. As she turned to face Thompson, she took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Officer Thompson," she began, her voice steady but firm, "you stopped me today because I didn't fit the image you had in your mind of who should drive a car like this. That's not law enforcement. That's profiling." Thompson's face flushed slightly, and he shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling to respond. The crowd murmured in agreement, their collective voices reinforcing Sarah's words. She could see that the weight of the moment was hitting him, and for the first time he seemed to realize the gravity of his actions. "I didn't mean for it to escalate like this," Thompson said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing my job." "Doing your job means respecting people's rights, officer," Sarah replied, her tone unwavering. "It means recognizing that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or the type of car they drive. You had a duty to verify my identity instead of assuming the worst." As she spoke, Sarah felt a surge of empowerment. She was no longer just a judge in a courtroom. She was a voice for those who had been marginalized and misunderstood. The crowd continued to watch, their smartphones capturing every word, every moment, as they bore witness to a confrontation that echoed a larger societal issue. "Things need to change within the department," she continued, addressing both Thompson and the onlookers. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who has ever been judged unfairly. We need to have conversations about bias, about the assumptions we make based on appearances." The crowd erupted in applause, their support invigorating her resolve. In that moment, Sarah knew she was not only standing up for herself, but for countless others who had faced similar experiences. "Judge Mitchell," Officer Barnes interjected, trying to redirect the focus. "If you'd like, I can provide you with the department's contact information for filing a formal complaint." "I appreciate that, officer," Sarah replied, her expression softening slightly. "But I believe that footage from today will speak volumes on its own. We need to ensure that these incidents are not swept under the rug." As she turned to leave, a woman from the crowd approached her, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up for us," she said, her voice trembling. "You're an inspiration." Sarah smiled gently. "Thank you. It's important that we all speak up and hold each other accountable. We can't be silent anymore." With that, she walked back to her car, the crowd parting to let her through, their admiration palpable. But as she sat in the driver's seat, she felt a mix of relief and reflection. The confrontation had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. And as she drove away, she knew that this experience would stay with her long after the day was done. Back at the precinct, Officer Thompson sat at his desk, the weight of today's events heavy on his shoulders. He typed up his report with mechanical motions, his mind racing with thoughts of what had just transpired. Chief Daniels, a seasoned officer with a reputation for fairness, entered the room, holding a printed copy of the initial stop notification. "Jake," he began, his tone serious, "what happened out there today was unacceptable. Thompson looked up, his expression a mix of defiance and guilt.
I was following protocol. I thought I was doing the right thing. Following protocol does not mean ignoring the humanity of the people you serve, Daniels replied sharply.
You pulled over Judge Mitchell because she didn't fit your preconceived notion of who should drive a Lexus. You need to reflect on why you made that assumption. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. Intention doesn't excuse the impact of your actions, Daniels continued, his voice firm. This isn't just a problem for you. It's a problem for all of us in law enforcement. We need to do better. As the conversation continued, Thompson realized that he was at a crossroads. He could choose to learn from this experience or allow it to harden his heart. The choice seemed clear, but the path ahead was uncertain. Meanwhile, Sarah returned home, her husband David, waiting for her with a worried expression. "Are you okay?" "I saw the news reports," he asked, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine, David," she reassured him, though her voice carried the weight of the day's events. "But it's clear that we have so much work to do. This isn't just about one incident. It's about changing the culture of bias that exists in our society." As they sat together in the quiet of their living room, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The incident had stirred something deep within her, igniting a fire to advocate for justice and equality. She knew that the conversation sparked by her experience would ripple far beyond that day, influencing lives and inspiring change. In the following days, Sarah's story went viral, spreading across social media and news outlets. Comments poured in from people sharing their own experiences of discrimination and bias, creating a platform for dialogue that had been long overdue. As she prepared for her court cases, she felt a sense of responsibility to continue this conversation, not just in her community, but on a larger scale. The incident had transformed her. She was no longer just a judge. She had become a voice for justice, a reminder that dignity should never be dictated by appearances. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Sarah was ready to confront it head-on. She was determined to ensure that her experience would lead to meaningful change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt marginalized or misunderstood. And as she stepped back into the courtroom, she knew that her fight for justice was just beginning. The days following the incident were a whirlwind for Sarah Mitchell. Her confrontation with Officer Jake Thompson had sparked a firestorm of discussion across social media and news outlets. Videos of the encounter, shared millions of times, showcased not only the shocking nature of the traffic stop, but also the broader issues of racial bias and discrimination that permeate society. Each view, each like, and each share added to the momentum of the conversation, transforming Sarah's story into a national dialogue. As she navigated her daily routine, Sarah reflected on the impact of her experience. The moment she stood up for herself had resonated with countless individuals who had faced similar situations. She received messages from people across the country. Some shared their own stories of profiling and discrimination, while others expressed their gratitude for her courage. Each message reinforced her belief that the conversation surrounding justice and equality needed to be amplified. Determined to harness this momentum, Sarah decided to take action. She began organizing community forums to discuss systemic bias and the need for reform within law enforcement. Her first event was held at a local community center, where she invited law enforcement officials, civil rights activists, and community members to engage in open dialogue. The turnout was overwhelming, with people eager to share their experiences and seek solutions together. During the forum, Sarah stood at the front of the room, a mixture of nerves and excitement coursing through her. She welcomed everyone warmly, acknowledging the diverse backgrounds and perspectives in attendance. "Thank you all for coming today," she began. "What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a larger issue that affects many in our community. Today, we have the opportunity to confront these challenges together." The discussion that followed was both passionate and enlightening, Community members spoke about their experiences with law enforcement, sharing stories of fear, misunderstanding, and bias.
Sarah listened intently, her heart heavy with empathy for those who had faced similar injustices. She knew that their voices mattered, and she was determined to ensure they were heard. As the conversation unfolded, a local police officer spoke up, expressing his desire for change within the department. "We're not all like that," he said, gesturing toward the crowd. "Many of us want to do better, but we need support from the community to help us understand these issues." His honesty was refreshing, and it sparked a dialogue about how police officers could be better trained to recognize and combat their own biases.
Encouraged by the willingness to engage, Sarah proposed actionable steps. Let's create a task force that includes community members and law enforcement to address these issues head-on, she suggested. We can collaborate on training programs that educate officers about bias and cultural sensitivity. The room buzzed with agreement, and it was clear that a shift was beginning to take shape. As the weeks passed, Sarah's efforts gained traction. The task force was established, and they began working on initiatives aimed at promoting understanding and accountability. They organized workshops, community outreach programs, and training sessions for police officers, each designed to foster positive relationships between law enforcement and the communities they served. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her work in the courtroom, but her perspective had changed significantly. Every case she presided over felt more meaningful, as she recognized the weight of her role in shaping justice. She became increasingly aware of the power dynamics at play, and made it her mission to ensure that every individual who entered her courtroom felt respected and valued. The media attention surrounding her story did not fade. Rather, it evolved into a platform for ongoing discussions about justice reform. Sarah was invited to speak at various conferences and events, sharing her experience and advocating for systemic change. She spoke not only about her own encounter, but also about the importance of collective action in addressing societal issues. In her speeches, she often recounted her moment of confrontation with Officer Thompson, emphasizing the need for awareness and empathy. "It's crucial that we recognize our own biases and challenge the assumptions we make about others," she would say. "When we take the time to listen and understand, we can begin to dismantle the walls that divide us." As Sarah's influence grew, she became a beacon of hope for many. Young people, especially those in marginalized communities, looked up to her as a role model. Sarah understood the importance of representation, and she made a conscious effort to mentor aspiring lawyers and judges, encouraging them to pursue their dreams regardless of the obstacles they might face. One evening, as she returned home after another long day of court and community work, David greeted her with a warm smile. "You've been incredible, Sarah," he said, pride evident in his voice. "You've turned a painful experience into something transformative." "Thank you, David," she replied, feeling the weight of his words. "But this is just the beginning. There's so much more to be done." As she settled onto the couch, Sarah reflected on the journey she had embarked upon. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but she was prepared to face it head-on. She knew that the fight for justice was ongoing, and her experiences had only strengthened her resolve. In that quiet moment, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The incident that had once felt like a personal affront had become a catalyst for change, not just for her, but for countless others. Sarah Mitchell had transformed into more than just a judge. She had become a symbol of resilience, advocacy, and the collective power of community action. With her heart full of hope and determination, Sarah was ready to continue her mission. She was committed to ensuring that her experience would not be in vain, that it would lay the groundwork for a future where justice was truly blind, where every individual, regardless of their appearance, would be treated with dignity and respect. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she knew that her fight for equality was just beginning.